Hi everyone. I'm really happy that you've joined us. We've had so many questions on both on our Instagram grid and on our story. So it's obviously something that concerns a lot of you, and quite rightly so. And there's a lot of misconceptions about allergies. So I'm very happy to have an absolute expert with me today, consultant pediatric allergy specialist. And he will be answering all your questions, and if we haven't managed to answer them on the live, we will definitely answer them with grid afterwards. So in my day it was quite interesting because we were told not to give peanuts or peanut butter early on, and it was probably completely the wrong advice, because after the LEAP study and the EAT study, it has been found, oh, forgive me, it's been found that actually it really helps to introduce it early, and I think that's an important thing to know. And we're going to talk about how you introduce these allergies to your child, also how you check if your child has grown out of them, because that's also very important. Because giving small amounts of egg, for example, in baked meatballs or in something like a chicken nugget with an egg coating, if your child's allergic to eggs, sometimes they can tolerate that, whereas they can't tolerate a scrambled egg or an omelette. But I've got an absolute specialist with me to answer all your questions. Thank you so much for joining us, Jose.
Hi, Annabel.
Thank you so much. And we've had so many questions. I hope you managed to see them on my Instagram, but I've also got them in front of me so we can ask them. But why don't we just jump straight in? Because the lady here said, what does a food schedule of a 1-year-old look like? Well, that's probably an allergy question. Maybe we'll just
Yeah, this is probably more a dietitian question.
Yes, maybe we could jump in on a couple of these because they're the really good questions that we had.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it says, and this is a good question, when it says may contain nuts, little one has peanut allergy. So what risk is it that might contain nuts? Because I know that now with Natasha's law, like a lot of manufacturers are protecting themselves by saying it may contain this and it may contain that, even though it doesn't contain it, just to make sure that no one sues them. And then there's not much that they can actually eat if you have an allergy. So yeah, tell us about that.
So it is interesting that I posted yesterday something about food labeling, and it would be important for people to go and read it, because people have the idea that different wording means different type of potential reactions. In reality, it's not true. The different wording that you're going to see in any food packaging means exactly the same. So the may contain or made in a factory that produces whatever, it's all the same thing. And that is why I believe that the law should be enforced in a way that they should be clear what food packaging should say. And because most people think that may contain is the highest risk, I think that you should level and use may contain for all sorts of food labeling, so people will know that all of them mean the same. So the potential is there, and there's an expert on cross-contamination called Hazel, and Hazel Gowland has did a research that she went into a factory and looked into that one, and she saw a variability between 80 and 8% of cross-contamination in the same line. So the risk is high.
Okay, good. So thanks for that. So there's another question here. My 6-month-old came out in a rash on the face when eating scrambled egg. Can I try it in baked goods? I would say yes, I would definitely try it in baked goods. What's your opinion?
It all depends on the rash, because there's so many different rashes. Now, is the rash hives? Are there swellings? Were there other problems associated? If there were, I wouldn't try it. It would need skin prick test first.
Okay.
But if it is not, then baked, try a small amount of baked is something they could do.
Okay, so interestingly, on my app, I now have an allergy tracker. So this will be a good one for that. So what you do is you insert on the app a picture of the child's reaction, so whether it's severe or whatever it is, and then the food that they ate. Because when you go and see someone like you, an allergy specialist, it's much easier then to diagnose the allergy if you've seen the reaction
absolutely
times. So that's why I decided to do it on the app, because it makes it then have your food diary on the app. You could take it with to your consultant, and thereby you get a much better and more informed kind of advice on what to do with your child.
Very, very often, and it's rare that skin prick tests bear false negatives, but they can do. But very often, when parents take a photo of the reaction, I can make a diagnosis from them. And especially if I make the clinical history and I find the association, I can make a diagnosis from that.
Mm-hmm. But it is good to know that with maybe not such an aggressive reaction, that if a child hasn't been able to eat something like, you know, omelette or scrambled eggs, then if they then try something like baked egg and a meatball, it will actually help them to tolerate and eventually be desensitized to eggs. So avoiding eggs
Definitely.
altogether probably isn't the best idea.
It's the principle about the wheat or the egg in a flour matrix or in a wheat matrix, because it decreases the allergenicity to the egg when it is on a wheat matrix.
So a lady here says, is a medium boiled egg more likely to cause allergic reaction than a hard boiled egg? That's an interesting question. While you answer that, I'm going to let my dogs in because they're out in the garden.
Yeah, okay. Yes, it is. It has to do with protein degradation. So if you consider that baked egg is the highest, with temperature of around 200 degrees and normally baking for around 30 minutes, 40 minutes, anything that is less cooked means that the protein that causes the allergy will be less degraded. By being less degraded, it increases the risk of getting an allergic reaction. So therefore, hard-boiled egg, less risk than soft-boiled egg.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So I missed that because one of my dogs came in and my puppy, who is a real rebel, will not come in. So he's still outside. now he's barking. So when do you introduce potentially allergenic foods? Because there's been a lot of research on this. And according to the LEAP study, if your child is potentially at risk and has severe eczema, by introducing these foods early on, you can help desensitize your child. But a lot of people are very worried about that, especially if their child has eczema. So I think that's a really important question, and I think it's really good for people to understand that.
It's interesting that people normally focus on the LEAP study, because LEAP study was just on peanuts. But the EAT study, that they focused on fish and egg as well, they also proven that at 4 months of age, you will decrease significantly the risk of developing an allergy. With the LEAP study and peanut, they shown that there is a reduced risk of 70 to 75% if you start introducing peanut very early. So, and with the EAT study, they shown more or less the same percentage. So introducing allergens early, and for us, allergists, we always we advocate the 4 months of age. Though normally they tend to say, yeah, if it is eczema in higher risk, 4 months of age. But to be honest, there's no risk of introducing allergens at 4 months of age, quite the opposite.
That's really interesting. And of course, we don't actually introduce peanuts as such, but we introduce like peanut butter, something with brown nuts. And I like to introduce it mixed in a little bit of carrot puree or some sweet potato puree. Yeah. Or like if you're doing baby-led weaning, then obviously after 4 months, we put it on toast. And you can make very nice like mashed banana and peanut butter.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, normally for the parents, I advise them, because we aim for 2 teaspoons once a week of either a peanut or tree nuts. But if they want to be careful, start with the tip of a teaspoon and increase from them. But if they tolerate it, then they can just mix it, as you said, in porridges, in other foods, because sometimes it actually enhances the flavor.
It does. I mean, I love peanut butter, so it's great. Try and choose one that doesn't have any sugar in it and try and find one. Again, back to a question that was asked before. My baby is 5 months and has a mild non-IG allergy to cow's milk protein on soya. He's exclusively breastfeeding. We plan to start weaning next month and wondered how we adapt weaning plans. Also, when do I test again by eating dairy and soy to see if she is reacting? And while you do that, I'm going to let the other dog in. Sorry.
Okay. So the best thing to do is, first of all, at 6 months of age, that's probably not the best time for us to start introducing milk directly or soya directly. Milk or cow's milk raw should be introduced from 12 months of age. Before that, to introduce something as cow's milk needs to be cooked or mixed in foods. Now, if you're talking about breast milk, by all means, you can try it at any age, especially or at any time, because if you already made an exclusion, very often children, after having an exclusion of roughly 4 weeks, most of them will outgrow it. So if we have done the exclusion at 4 weeks at least, and I know that some mothers will go longer than that, try it again. Just try it. Of course, don't try both of them on the same day. Try one and see how the reaction is. If there's a reaction, stop it, and then a few days later, try the other one.
We had an interesting question, which was, my child's allergy to milk is getting worse. Does that mean that she's not going to grow out of it?
Okay. Now, is it IgE or non-IgE? If they're talking about IgE, likely is not going to grow out. It is uncommon that children do not outgrow IgE milk allergies, but it does exist. And I have a few patients that I see, and one of them has already had at least 2 anaphylactic events to milk.
So if a child has had an allergy to eggs and you think they may have grown out of it, is it okay to then introduce something like a scrambled egg to the child? Or do you need to speak first?
I'll go phased. I would go phased. I would always start, if the child has never had baked eggs, I would always start on baked eggs and start building upon that. And that is why there's an egg ladder. And actually the BDA has a 5-step egg ladder. I would follow the 5-step egg ladder.
I think baked in meatballs and biscuits and things like that would be the safest thing to do before you move on to eggs and scrambled egg and omelette.
Scrambled egg will sit probably around step 3 or 4. So it is not as well degraded protein as a baked egg.
There's a lady here and she says that her child is allergic to legumes like lentils. Does that mean that her child will also be allergic to peanuts? Because peanut is a legume, which people think is not.
Increased risk. Yeah, there is an increased risk. I would test before introducing the peanut. It's the same as actually it's the same as egg. Though egg and peanut, the protein is different. Studies shown that an egg allergy increases the risk of a peanut allergy and the other way around. So if someone has an egg allergy and that child has not tried peanut, skin prick test before introducing peanut, or the other way around.
Which was basically like a mother had a child and they didn't develop a reaction to peanuts until 3 years old. How likely is it that her other child will also be allergic to peanuts?
No.
There's
no relationship. No.
But it's interesting, it's not actually hereditary, an allergy. It's more like your predisposition to get an allergy. Like if you have eczema, it's more likely that you will have an allergy.
Yeah. But so what has been proven so far, allergies-wise, is more towards asthma and eczema. So those ones we have found the genes that are related to that. But to foods, we think that there might be a gene because we know that some families are more prone to certain types of allergies than others, but that gene has not been identified yet. We also see that on milk allergy, for instance, especially the non-IgE type.
Question, exactly the same question actually, which is an interesting question. Her child has a cow's milk allergy. How likely is it that her second child, who hasn't started weaning yet, will also have a cow's milk allergy?
If no one else in the family has it, the risk is...
does.
The risk is slightly increased by about 15%, but not that much. Okay, so it's not guaranteed that the child will have it.
There's a good question here. I want to try and get through as many as we can. Why are there so many allergies now, especially to milk?
That is a type of question of how long is a piece of string. So all started, and we all discussed this the other day. In my opinion, all started with something called the hygienic hypothesis. The things that are very well cleaned. And I think that one part, and I'm having planned a chat with a dietitian about that, is the biome. So our gut and the bacteria that exists in our gut is extremely important for the development or prevention of allergies. Because the biggest part of the immune system that we have is our gut. Is nothing else, is our gut. And in reality, the development of things like IgE and histamines were made for the gut only because of parasites. Because the parasites cause the highest raise of IgE and histamine. So it started all there. So if we control the gut and the biome, yes. And then we have all the other advice that was given for, I don't know how many decades, for mothers or breastfeeding, so pregnant mothers or breastfeeding, to exclude all sorts of food in their diet, which is wrong. They should not.
Yes. So it's introducing these foods early, but it's also like a little bit of like germs is not a bad thing. If you bring a child up in a completely hygiene environment, then their immune system is never challenged. And that is,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I think possibly it's going to be even worse now with COVID and people wearing masks and cleaning everything and sanitizing everything. These children will, their immune systems won't be challenged and possibly they will develop more allergies. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. And in reality, there are studies showing that children that live on the countryside have lesser incidence of allergies than the ones living in cities.
That's
It
interesting.
has, and it has to do with that a bit of germs here and there because of the countryside living. It has
Yeah.
to do with that.
This lady's saying that specialists arranged a blood test for tree nuts. Is there a reason why it would be a blood test and not a skin prick? That's a good question, actually.
Okay. I'm not in favor of blood tests, except in particular situations.
Yes.
So, and there's very interesting studies showing that blood tests on children under 2 years of age bear a lot of false positives.
Oh,
So
really?
basically, loads of them. Basically, you're going to start excluding foods on a child that
Yes.
in reality they might not be allergic to them. Skin prick tests have a higher positive predictive value than blood tests. The blood tests that I do are not the specific IGs. I do something else called component diagnostics, in which I'll look into all the proteins in that food to see which one the child is allergic to, because that will give me an idea of the possibility of outgrowing or not outgrowing the allergy, but also of the severity of allergies. Apart from that, I don't do blood tests.
Okay. That's very interesting, actually. I didn't know that. So I work quite a lot with Professor Adam Fox, and
Hmm.
he is one of the people that have brought in this new way of potentially helping children who have a very severe allergy to peanuts by introducing a tiny amount of peanut protein and
Yeah.
increasing the amount each week. You have to go to hospital twice a week, and then eventually you have to keep on having peanuts or some kind of peanuts like peanut butter every day of your life. But if that could save your life, if you had cross-contamination, then it
Mhm.
must be worth doing. So
Mm.
what do you think about this new way of potentially helping children who have a very, very severe allergy that could be five?
I think that for the children at high risk, that and especially because, as you said, the cross-contamination is the biggest danger, and that is what we're trying to do. So, but people need to think that not every child that has a peanut allergy can do it. Because the restriction, so the criteria for us to choose a child to start that treatment called palforzia is very, very high.
Is it?
And people also need to bear in mind that even the ones that went on palforzia, there's a 15% chance of getting anaphylaxis while we are doing the escalation.
That's not good.
Yeah, there's a 15% risk. So while we are doing the escalation, because it starts on a low dose, it starts around 1 milligram, and the aim is at least 300 milligrams. And 300 milligrams, for people to have an idea, is the equivalent of one peanut.
Right.
So eventually, for some children, we might go to 1,000 milligrams, so 1 gram, which is roughly 3 and something peanuts. So important, yes.
Yes.
Is it a treatment? No, because mainly you stop it, it
Yes.
will reverse symptoms.
Okay.
So you go back to the stage that
Yes.
you
No,
were
I
before.
you stop it, and it doesn't really work with adults either. You have to be a child for it to work.
So,
Um,
for my opinion, it should be mainly for monosensitized. So someone that is just peanut allergic. Because if you are peanut allergic and tree nut allergics, there's no point. Because the risk of cross-contamination is still there because of all the other tree nuts when you go and buy something. So monosensitized to peanut, yes. In particular conditions, as I said. Yeah, I think it is very, very much worth it to do it. But people need to bear in mind that this is lifelong.
Two questions here that came in. One is, I think that the parent said that her child is 16 months and she hasn't given her child nuts because she's really worried about giving nuts in case the
Yeah.
child gets. Would you advise then for someone like that to maybe first give something like peanuts in the doctor's surgery so that gives her that confidence that everything's going to be okay? Maybe there's some kind of history behind that, why she should be worried.
Okay, if you talk about doctor surgery, GP surgery, forget it. Because unfortunately, the knowledge of allergy in primary care is
Yeah.
minimal. not a lot of GPs are, fortunately there are a few, but not a lot. The vast majority of them are not aware of
Yeah,
allergy,
and
not even a
yeah, there are not enough pediatric allergy specialists
no.
either. So it's very difficult to get an appointment. So sometimes by the time you get an appointment, you've missed that really important window of opportunity to introduce those foods.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And that is why it is so important to train primary care on how to advise parents to do it. But
yeah,
also, I think it is so important the things that you and I are doing about telling people what to do to try, because there's so many urban myths that have been created. There is so much confusion about what to do and not to do
yes.
that it's natural that they don't know. And it's natural that a lot of them are going to say, I prefer to exclude because they have because they think that are getting the best for their child, which in reality, by excluding, they are increasing the risk of developing allergies in the future.
That's really what someone said. Thank you very much. He likes your clear answers. That's a nice compliment to you.
Thank you.
And now this is a good one. My little one had a cow's milk allergy, and I need to start the milk ladder. She is now 13 months, and I'm yet to start. The issue I have is that her sleep has never been great, and so I'm nervous about adding another reason for her to have poor sleep. I completely sympathize with that.
Yeah.
Last night, she was up screaming for 2 hours with a windy tummy, which may have been from a small amount of cheese from her brother. Naughty brother.
Not the best start.
When she's screaming at night, I mean, like, I do sympathize because I had a child who didn't sleep through the night. She was nearly 9 months old. It was a nightmare. So how do you deal with that? Because it is like, oh, I want to introduce it, but at the same time, I don't want another sleepless night.
It is in everything that we decide. We need to see what is the best option and what is going to cause the less problems. Of course, there's the worry that we're going to start introducing the milk ladder and they're going to have problems. But in reality, if we delay the introduction, will it create further problems in the long term?
Yes.
My suggestion would be start. But milk ladder, and I personally, there's a new milk ladder which is a 6-step, and there's the old milk ladder which is a 12-step. I personally still prefer the 12-step one. I think it is a more gentle way of introducing milk, and actually doesn't take.
Some
Sorry?
people might know what the milk ladder is, just to explain. So you start off with something like a malted milk biscuit.
Malted milk biscuit, and we go on steps.
Pie, something like that, then hard cheese, then yogurt, and by week 6 you take milk.
Yeah. So, but I wish it was that fast.
That's very small.
Most children will take around 6 months to a year to go to the top of the milk ladder. And as I was saying, though the 12-step seems longer, in reality, I find most of the children that I see outgrowing their milk allergy sooner than with the 6-step. Now, the other advice that I give all of them is don't give the full portion when you start. Any step, my suggestion is start at 1/8 or start at 1/16. It's just a little bit. Because very often, also very, very important, is the confidence that parents need to get. Because they are so afraid of introducing something, yes. They need also to build their own confidence on introducing an allergen. So start slow.
Yes, and actually there was an interesting question. I have to be quick because they disappear if I don't ask quickly. Sorry, I don't interrupt you because it's really interesting. But she says, can a child under 12 months eat a malted milk biscuit? Because they have sugar in them.
Yeah.
That's a yes. They can. Yes.
Yeah, they can. Though we start the milk ladder at 12 months of age, not before 12 months of age. But in reality, potentially they could. But milk ladders should start at 12 months of age, not before.
Okay, all right. And there's another question about this. I would love more information on what constitutes a fail on a milk ladder. Can you push through minor symptoms, or do you fail straight away with the first minor symptom? I think that's a very good question. And actually, I've never asked that question of anyone before, and I think it's a very valid question.
So first of all, I don't use the word fail because it brings such a negative impact on people. I think it is passing, not passing, or positive, negative. So in reality, we call it a positive or negative. Now, the food challenge, it depends about that having symptoms and stopping or not stopping, depends on the doctor or nurse or both that are there and how confident they are. So I've been in units in which my nurses are excellent and they will keep on pushing it. And very often they go to the final stage of the food challenge without any problems. But I've been in others that they are not as confident, they are not as experienced, and they will stop at the minor symptoms. Also depends on which doctor is there, how much knowledge does that person know, not just about allergies, but how to manage the allergy or the allergy reaction if it happens. So it depends on a lot of things. Personally, I always push, I always try a little bit more, but all depends on the signs. If the signs are minimal, let's give, because it's every 15 or 20 minutes steps. Let's wait the 15 or 20 minutes and see. Is everything still okay? Let's try the next one.
But some people are not doing it with a doctor, they're doing it at home. They're trying it at home. So with them, probably, if you go back to my app and you take a picture of what's happened to your child, you send it to your consultant pediatric allergy specialist, he will maybe say that that's okay, you can carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, because that will give an indication. But that they will need a reply to that within 15, 20 minutes before the next step.
Understand. But maybe you can do it like, sending it to somebody, or by, Facebook, FaceTime or whatever. There are now. There was a question a little while back, which is quite interesting, and it was following on from this. But if you have an allergy to both milk and eggs, do you do both the ladders at the same time?
No.
Wow, that's going to be so hard.
No, I wouldn't. It depends on how it is and the risks involved. Which one was the worst reaction? So there's a lot of things that we need to consider. There's no strict priority of shall we go for milk or shall we go for egg, because both of them exist in so many products that the risk of both of them is probably more or less the same. Should we start with the milk because it's the longest ladder? Probably, personally, I probably would start with the egg because it is the shortest ladder, and the potential to start introducing the other one afterwards is a shorter period of time. So the milk ladder, as it's going to take far longer, then you still are excluding egg that you shouldn't. I'll probably go start with the egg. And also consider that a lot of the products on the milk ladder will need egg at some point.
That's true. That's true, actually.
So might as well start with the egg.
So if a child is allergic to cow's milk, what would you put that child onto after 12 months? Because we know that before 12 months, there's all these neonates and all these milks. They don't taste very nice, to be honest, but the child will tolerate them as long as you give it to the child early enough. But beyond that, what are the milks you would recommend to give to your child that are good sources of calcium?
Soya milk
would be your...
It's the best vegetable milk around. Soya milk. Yeah.
Okay. Oat milk, which is quite fashionable.
Oat milk, it is the second choice.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, the third choice when it comes to nutrition and calcium is pea milk.
Pea milk. Okay.
Soy milk, definitely.
A bit like this, but it was about her child doesn't really like some of the gluten-free pasta. So what other pastas were there? And actually, I was looking up, and there's so many pastas. There's the pea protein pasta, the lentil pasta, the pasta. I mean, there's so many. They look amazing. There's a beetroot pasta. There's so many things now if you're gluten-free. They never used to.
No, the choice now, fortunately, is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And so to go, in the old days, it was either gluten or gluten-free. And the gluten-free, as you say, doesn't taste very good. I've tried it. But nowadays, you have so many substitutes. And let's go a little bit back. Pasta, the origin of pasta, China. In China, they have rice pasta.
Yes.
They have corn pasta.
Yes.
And they have the normal wheat pasta. So varieties are there, and now there's a development of so many others, so the choice is there. And actually, some of them, they taste really nice. The rice one is really nice.
What about these dairy-free cheeses, like Violife? I think some of them are coconut-based. Actually, they taste really good. There's one that's really very much like Parmesan, and it works very well. What do you think about
Oh, by all means, I have tried the soya-based one, which is also really nice. Soy replacements, not just in milk, so in cheese, butter, and all that, yogurt, amazing. They taste so good.
Really good now. They've come on a lot.
Yeah,
There's a good
but
question. Sorry,
mm,
trying to get the questions. So this parent's like, if their child is allergic to cow's milk, isn't it true that they're also going to be possibly allergic to soy milk? They can go hand in hand.
so there's a cross reactivity, but does not mean that they will be allergic to it. Not all child. The variability is very big. There are studies. There are studies showing something like 35% cross reactivity. There's others showing much higher at around 70%. So there's a massive variability. I would try it because otherwise you're just going to exclude something that is a good source of protein and a good source of calcium.
But not before 6 months, though. Soy milk.
No, though proper research that was done mainly in China, which is the country that knows more about this, has not shown an influence on child development, because people are very often worried about something called the phytoestrogens.
Yeah.
The studies done in China have not shown an impact, and they've been drinking soy milk probably for hundreds of years.
There was somebody asking, like, at what age can you give these vegan cheeses? Is there anything in them that you couldn't give to an under 1-year-old child?
It all depends on what the vegan cheese is made of. But if it is a vegan cheese made of soya, by all means, why not?
Yeah. I mean, there isn't be high in salt, but we do give ordinary cheese to babies, and so a little bit of cheese is okay.
Yeah.
In fact, I always think that, babies need more fat in their diet than adults do, and adding a bit of cheese and things like that is actually good for them because they're growing so rapidly in their first year.
Absolutely. And also because of that, the fat is also why we try to introduce peanuts and tree nuts, because the fat in peanuts and tree nuts is so amazing.
Absolutely. If a baby has a mild reaction to a food, should we then avoid it or try it again later?
If it is a mild, very often, I'll try it. If it is very mild, and we're talking about something that has not led to swellings and hives and breathing compromises and all that. If it is a very mild one, because most times those mild reactions that people think it is an allergic reaction probably was not to the food, and it was to something else. And that's something else very often we're not going to find it.
But let's talk about reflux, because very often if a baby has reflux, how do you know if it's reflux or an allergy?
If it is
horrible,
if it is associated with allergy, we're talking about non-IgE allergies. But the non-IgE allergies, and especially the cow's milk protein allergy, non-IgE, I tend to look into the triad of symptoms. So the reflux, very often there's the silent reflux, so the baby that cries all the time that you cannot lie the baby down and then needs to be weaned for half an hour, 45 minutes or longer. Eczema, and either constipation or diarrhea. So if there's this triad of symptoms, very likely to be an allergy. If there's not a triad of symptoms, if it is simply isolated reflux, unlikely to be an allergy.
So you're saying, like, if there's eczema and constipation, do you say that? That's more actual allergy. If there are none of those and just them kind of feeling a lot of pain and like positing the milk, that's more likely to be reflux.
That is more likely to be reflux, yes. The only one that normally we find isolated is a milk allergy, is if they start passing blood in the stool after having milk. If it is something like that, we have to consider that it is what we call an allergic proctocolitis.
Someone's asked, does stomach cramping, is that possible? Could that be that your child's allergic to something?
Unlikely. Gut is not allergy. Allergy is a point of contact. Lips, face, tongue is where the allergen touches, is where you have the first reaction. So if you have you eat something or you drink something, there's no reaction there, and at a distance there's something, or if it is in the gut that something is happening, eventually you can call it an intolerance, but it's not an allergic reaction.
But sometimes you have an immediate reaction, and sometimes you have a delayed reaction. How can it be? How many hours afterwards could you still have a reaction to food? Because then it's very difficult to pinpoint which food caused that.
So up to 2 hours, we tend to consider it an IG, so the type of allergy that we are worried. 2 hours onwards, so 2 hours to 72 hours, normally is the delayed type or non-IG type of reaction. But that gap of 2 hours is that gray area that we need to look a little bit more into the history. And as you said, if they take a few photos and they showed me, yeah, sometimes I've had patients, not commonly, but that at 3 hours developed signs with hives and swellings, and I tested them and they were positive. It's not common because the normal ones is minutes. You know.
So what you're saying is, if it's after 2 or 3 hours, it's unlikely to be an allergy.
Yeah, or if it is the or if it is the IG, the non-IG one, so the delayed type. And for the non-IG, and it's something that we talked about that probably we need to talk at some point. For the non-IG, there are no tests that we can do. It's only for the IG ones.
That's super helpful, because I know a lot of people like, oh, my child had an allergic reaction, but it was 6 hours afterwards. I don't know which food it was. So I've given them so many different foods since then, and then what could it be? So that actually is really to know that.
And I have 24, 48 hours. But imagine on 24, 48 hours, how many foods that child has had?
It's impossible. And it's the best way of isolating and finding out what your food allergy is in your child is an exclusion diet.
Yeah.
Yes.
If it is non-IgE, yes, exclusion diet. If it is IgE, skin prick test.
Okay, if it's IG and it involves the immune system, a skin prick test. But if it's not involving the immune system, then you have to avoid that food. Okay.
It's exclusion, and very often it's interesting that we exclude, but the improvement of symptoms is so slow that very often we find out when we try to reintroduce it again, and then there's bang, all the symptoms come back. And that's normally how we identify. But this is for the non-IG, the delayed ones. But if it is for the IG, no, skin prick test, definitely.
A lot of people asked if we're going to save this, and yes, I am saving it. It will be on my Instagram, and then you can just go on and watch it. It goes onto your IG live. So yeah, all your words of wisdom will be saved forever. Really important. So what are the common allergies? I mean, I know that dairy is very common, but actually egg is more common than people think.
Yeah, very, very common. Very common. Yeah, wheat is not as common as that.
Yeah,
but milk, and actually there's a rise on milk allergy. There's been a rise on milk allergy over the last decade. Not just a rise on the milk allergy in general, but the cases of anaphylaxis to milk has also increased significantly.
What you can use instead of egg, because I think it's important to help people with that. And I find that a bit of water and some chia seeds or flax seeds work very well for binding. So if you're making something like I find that's really, really helpful. And in cakes, I think you can use things like mashed banana, apple puree. That works well too. We've done a lot of developing recipes without egg. And we have a lot of things on our app which are without egg, without dairy. Because in fact, my favorite biscuits ever, which I make every single week for my children, are an egg-free oat and raisin cookie. It's amazing. It's the best cookie ever. It's in my new book called Fun, Fast, and
The combination must be nice. I love them both.
You know
oat and raisins.
They're better without egg. They're much better consistency. And I make them without egg, and we don't have an egg allergy. So
yeah,
it's really nice. Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to tell us, like we haven't covered, that's really important?
Let me just see one thing.
Yeah.
There was one of the questions that someone sent me is about coconut allergy.
Okay.
And because that child had a weak positive IG test to coconut. So it comes back to what we were talking about before. I don't do specific IGs because it brings a lot of false positive, and then suddenly we are excluding, and possibly this one with the weak positive, very likely it is not really an allergy. But the question, what is interesting, is the oil. And very often people ask me that their child is allergic to whatever it is, can you use an oil or not? Okay, it's a mixed answer, because if it is highly purified oil, the protein is removed, so therefore will not cause an allergic reaction. And for you to have an idea, one of the vitamins that we use in children, called Avidec, has peanut oil. and
Abidex, yes. Yes.
it is safe to use on peanut allergy sufferers because it is highly purified. So the protein has been removed, will not cause an allergic reaction. But most of the oils that we use or find for cooking, they are not highly purified. Therefore, the
Or like
protein is going to be there.
sunflower oil.
Yeah.
So which are the best oils if your child has an allergy? Which are the ones you would recommend? What about rapeseed?
Well, I'm Portuguese. I go for olive oil. I use olive oil for everything.
Yeah, we were going like, what are the best oils
Yeah.
for someone who has an allergy?
Olive oil, it's the best. The
Olive oil is
taste,
the best.
yeah. But interestingly, there's a rise on allergy to olives.
Oh, is there really?
Yeah, interesting. Mainly among Mediterranean countries, but
Interesting.
there's
I didn't
a
know that.
rise in that one. Yeah.
I went a little bit of a PR thing, but we have, and from popular request, we are bringing out some new frozen meals. This is our cowboy mince, which is going to come out, which is dairy free. And we've also got a new meal coming out in our frozen range, which is sweet and sour chicken, dairy free. And then we have this one, which is also dairy free, because I think it's quite difficult sometimes for children to get really delicious meals that are dairy free. So I've
Yeah.
tried to produce some more, and that are really good.
Look, anything, especially when it comes to allergies, anything that can help parents nowadays, I think it is so important. And as we discussed, unfortunately, with the new change of food labeling, I find that
I know.
parents are now struggling more since Natasha's law has been published.
Yeah.
They are struggling more than before that because, as you said, it is a blank cover. Everything may contain all sorts of things under the sun, which is not very helpful. Not
No.
helpful at all.
Well, we make ours in a nut-free factory, so we don't say it contains traces of nuts. It doesn't contain any nuts, and it's really important. And then we just put all of the allergens in bold, so you know exactly what they are. But this one has celery. But celery isn't that common as an allergy.
It is one of the 14 major allergens.
Yes, but it's not very common.
But it's not very common, no. I can count by the fingers in one hand the number of patients that I have with a celery allergy.
That's
So why is it decided to have, they put there as one of the major 14 allergens is doubt to say.
Interesting. If anybody's weaning, this is my favorite book ever. My first book I wrote, The Complete Wean Telomere Plan, and there's loads of information about that there and lots of dairy-free recipes. So if anybody's looking to get a book on weaning, I would definitely recommend that book. Jose, thank you so much.
Very
I just
welcome.
sent you an email. I don't know whether you saw it, but if you could take a look at, and in your own time, some of the questions that were on my Instagram. And if anybody's question wasn't answered, I'm really sorry. They came across very, very quickly. And sometimes I just didn't have time to read them. So I do apologize if I didn't get to them. And if you really want a question answered, pop it under this live, and hopefully one of us will get to it and give you that answer, because I know it is a very
absolutely.
time.
Yeah, I'll look into them and I'll reply to them.
And yeah, if anybody wants to go and see a fabulous doctor and get a personal one-on-one, I would recommend Jose. So we will have his details, and I'll put his Instagram up there as well. But we must do this again. It's been really popular, and we had so many people ask questions. It was
happy to do it.
So much. It was super interesting talking to you. I learned a lot as well. So it's really, really lovely.
Well, so thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll speak soon. And thank you everybody for your questions and joining us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone as well.
Good luck if you do.
Okay. See you soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.